Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where Alex and I aim to answer your bike, tech and maintenance related questions, as ever. You can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag AskGCNTech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible
within the allotted time.
First
up, it's Knack. They say, is it common for your shoes to rub on your wheels when you're turning sharply? If so, do you try and mitigate this, or do you just live with it and make sure your pedals are down in tight corners? Okay, a couple of questions here.
I've got a couple of big things
Is
to say
it common? On smaller sized bikes, yes, it can be common. And it's also starting to become more common on gravel bikes because of the big, massive, chunky tyres.
Yeah. So there's two things that cause this, right?
Yeah.
One is bikes wanting more nimble handling, and so you reduce what's known as the front center of the bike. So typically the rake of the fork has been angled back a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And the head tube angle and things like that. And this can help a bike feel more agile. So that's the first thing. The next thing is people riding a smaller sized bike.
Yeah.
Because when you ride a smaller sized bike, say like if you're between two sizes, like me, typically between a 56 and a 58 centimetre frame, I'm more likely to get this on the smaller one.
Yeah.
The other thing that causes this is a bike fitting thing. Now, there are kind of two schools of thought within bike fitting, broadly speaking.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say about this?
Yeah, go on.
So one church of bike fitting comes from Phil Burt, who's been on the channel a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Phil Burt was instrumental in helping set up Retool, and Retool had a big part in informing other bike fit systems used by big brands.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Phil Burt's bike philosophy often revolves around bringing the rider forwards, like shorter cranks, opening your hip angle, having, say, less layback on the saddle, bringing you more forwards over the front of the bike into more of like a sort of pursuit aero position. And as part of that, he often endorses, and this whole bike fitting philosophy endorses more of like a mid-foot cleat. But in positioning someone on a mid-foot cleat,
your foot's coming forwards.
The foot comes forwards on the pedal and is more likely to hit that tyre.
Yeah.
Whereas the important thing to realise is that's like, whoa.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
We're just mid-take. Whereas a more sort of long-standing view of like optimum bike ergonomics and fitting is having your cleat further forwards underneath the sort of ball of your foot, where you imagine you push off if you're sprinting, and that then reduces that problem because you don't have your toes then clipping the front wheel. Yeah.
Now, this is actually a problem I have on a couple of bikes at the moment, and it really only presents itself on slow speed turning, be it if you're in a city area and you're trying to turn through tight little streets, but also in terms of what you can do to mitigate this. So if your shoe is only just clipping the tyre, I really don't think you should be worrying about it, and it's just a case of just being mindful of it, and when you are riding at those low speeds, just try to keep your cranks up and down in that vertical position. There you go, pretty simple. Bat Porio next, they say, hi GCN, do wax chains wear out in time, even if not ridden, or does the recommendation of miles before re-waxing is the same regardless of how long it takes to reach that distance? If so, I've just done 100 miles in a whole month, so I also rotate a few chains, so one might sit in the cupboard for over a month before I start using it after it's been waxed. Does it impact the longevity of the wax?
No.
I'm gonna throw it out there, no.
No. Yeah.
What I think we should address is lots of wax products out there will say this type of product is good for around 500 miles, but what is going to have the biggest impact is the conditions that you're riding in and also the power that you're putting through the bike. Because I know on the Silca information, the examples they give are an average power of 250 watts. So if you ride at a higher power, you're probably going to reduce that ever so slightly. And if you ride at a lower power, you might extend it out a little
My
bit.
chains last ages.
No.
Okay. Right. Next question is from Keith Wilson, who said, I have hand-built wheels by a noted wheel builder, but I'm repeatedly breaking spokes on road wheels. He does repair them without fuss, but what can I do to stop this occurring? Should I buy new wheels or should I rebuild them? Maybe find a different wheel builder.
A different noted wheel builder. No, look, so at some point, spokes will break, but if it's happening on a regular basis, there's clearly a problem.
I think you need a stronger wheel.
Yeah, I would say it might be that you've essentially had someone build you a lightweight performance wheel with thin, lightweight spokes. They might not be best suited to what you're
maybe
doing.
go for something stronger with more spokes.
Yeah, I would say that.
Millicent is next, who says, I know there's all sorts of gravel bike geometries now, from racing bikes to more recently bikes based on mountain bike geometry, but there are also road bikes ranging from touring to endurance racing. When deciding between owning both or a single sort of do-it-all bike, how noticeable are the differences in geometry between a road bike and a gravel bike, particularly at what I assume are the most similar and most different ends? I.e. between an endurance road bike and a race gravel bike, and a race road bike and a more slack mountain bike inspired gravel bike. I can look at the geometry charts, but without having the chance to try them, I don't know what to feel the differences are, what they amount to.
Right. I feel like based on how they position their question, they already have a pretty good understanding of some of the differences. Road bikes, more aggressive position, like the fork rake will be at the steeper angle to make the steering more responsive. Gravel bikes, a bit slacker, bit more like stability and control. Obviously the geometry's got to change because you've got to allow clearance for the bigger tyres. And if you looked at the extreme ends, you've obviously got your mountain bike style gravel bikes, and you've got really racy gravel bikes. And when you get to that middle ground, there is a lot of blurring of geometry between them. And in terms of having no idea what any of these bikes are going to feel like, well, this is the beauty of why local bike shops exist, because really, even going through different sizes of bikes is going to change how they feel to ride. So I think without trying to... You need to pinpoint down the bikes that you're interested in and that style of bike, and then I think you really need to go to your local bike shop or look for a brand that has demo days when you can try the products, because until you've ridden a bike, it's hard to know exactly what is going to feel right for you.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think also just you need to think about realistically what is the kind of riding that you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people might think, the sort of racy option looks really cool, but if you're not racing, get something more comfortable. You
wouldn't buy a 4-in-1 car that drives the shops, would you?
No. So next question is from James Fussy, who says, I have a wax chain on my TT bike. I only go out in the dry on my TT bike, but what happens if it comes to a race and it's wet? What's best, remove the chain and put on a different chain with lube, or stick it out with the wax chain? For reference, the TT is 180 kilometres, and I'm concerned that if it rains, what do I do with my chain?
Well, it won't go out. It's just said if it rains, it doesn't go out.
Yeah.
Won't be doing it.
So that's a long old time trial, 180 kilometres. Wowzers. So I'm guessing he's an Iron Man.
Yeah, I'm going to say so.
A prospective Iron Man.
Yeah. So, if it's raining, wax lube still excels in all of these conditions. But in those conditions, it isn't optimal for that kind of product. I would still use the wax chain and just accept that at the end of the event, I've got to kind of look after my chain and dry it a bit, because by that stage, most of the wax will have gradually worn off.
Oh, yeah, one of the things I would suggest is for that, I would use the endurance chip additive. Yeah. So this is it's been an absolute game changer for me. But
it's because you keep riding so far. You keep doing these miles.
Yeah. So we were using, I was riding in the wet when I went away to Nice, and it rained the whole week. Rode in the wet, wax chains, no issue.
Yeah.
And part of that is because I was using the endurance chip. So this is an additive. It looks like a bar of soap. It's not. You put that into your wax pot, and it turns your normal wax into like endurance wax, which isn't quite as fast. It's not quite as low friction. There's a slight trade-off, but it's much longer lasting, and it stays on there a lot more. And it's for that what you're describing. I would go with that. Yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree. For your Taiwan end-to-end, did you manage to convince Connor to use chain wax, or did he still try using oil?
So on that, it was so atrocious. By the time it got onto day 3, bearing in mind we'd minimal
resource.
Yeah, and we'd ridden 450 kilometers in pretty much torrential rain up mountains.
Oh God, yeah.
We were like, there was the interesting thing was my chain wasn't loud at that point.
Yeah.
Like it still had it was waxed, and there was still, both of our chains weren't loud. They were all right because we still had another day left. What we resorted to doing is just putting some Synergetic on.
Yeah. Okay.
And applied that on.
Yeah.
And then it was dry on the last day, so I didn't even have to. But there you go.
Of course. Actually, there's some advice for this last person. If you think it's going to rain for your event, put oil-based lubricant on your chain. It will stop the rain coming. There you go.
Yeah.
Right. Final question is from Adam Sard 9659. They say, is there anything to be concerned about if I were to store my bicycle inside a car on a hot summer's day? If I rode somewhere and then met with my friends and family and didn't want to leave it on a bike rack, does the heat inside the car have a negative effect on the carbon or the grease? For reference, summers where I am can get to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'd imagine inside the car getting to over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't think at those temperatures you really need to be concerned in terms of properties and materials and greases. The only thing that springs to my mind is like tyre pressures.
Tyres could burst.
Yeah.
I think there is damage that could happen to components. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, inside cars can get super, super hot. I remember Dimitris Katsanis telling me a story about how he cured a bike frame that he was making.
No way.
He was making a carbon fibre bike frame and he cured it in the back of a car. Okay. Bit ghetto, but back in the day.
Okay, so obvious things we need to be aware of. Tyre pressures, okay, that's got to be the first thing. If you're going to leave your car leave your bike in a really, really hot car, maybe worth dropping your tyre pressure down a little bit first.
I think one of the other things is if you can cover it.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a good thing. Rather than if the light is beaming through and onto it and heating it, then it'll get hotter on a surface. If you can cover your bike with blankets,
yeah, that's going to help.
That's not going to help keep it warm. Insulation works both ways.
Yeah.
It's like if you have a thermos flask, it can keep a cold liquid cold and it can keep a hot liquid hot. So some insulation over the top, i.e. a blanket, will help.
But I don't think you need to be alarmed in terms of you're not going to come back and find a pile of melted carbon. That would be ridiculous.
A puddle.
Yeah. I'm sure I left my bike in here. There's just a chain and some disc rotors in the back of the boot. Where's it gone?
Yeah.
Personally, I think don't sweat it. But yeah, at some point, if it gets crazy, crazy, crazy hot.
I do remember years ago doing a university triathlon on a day when there was a heat wave.
Yeah.
And everyone had sort of gone and racked their bikes in transition, and then you just heard this chorus of it was like tyres were just popping as they were heated up in the sun.
Talking about the sun, one thing I think you should be aware of is the UV damage to paints is a big thing. I used to...
carbon resins.
Yeah, years and years ago.
And tyres. Tyres get messed up.
Got a really pointless story.
Come on then, hit me with UV.
Years ago when I used to live at home with my parents, I used to always leave my bike in their conservatory, angled the same way every single day. And it was only after I had this bike for about a year and I was washing it and I turned it around and I was like, hold on, I did a double take. One half of my bike was really faded. I turned it around, the other half was really bright and still looks new. So I was like, well, I've kind of just ruined my bike now.
There you go.
There you go. That was all of my cool story.
Cool story.
Nice. If you got any cool stories of your own or questions about cool stories.
Or you want to hear more cool stories next week. Then you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and keep your questions coming, and hopefully we'll answer them. We've got to go now.
I've got more cool stories. Bye.
Love you, bye.